A very good evening. A warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay, and welcome to the back end of Wimbledon week. It has been glued to the TV stuff. If you, like me, are a tennis fan, and plenty of drama, plenty of action, plenty of world-class tennis from SW19. But why on earth are we talking about tennis on Dan Really Likes Wine? Well, part of this evening's show links rather directly to that, because one of the wine brands that we involve in our show this week, this particular Thursday, is Champagne Lanson, which is the official champagne of Wimbledon. And I can tell you that the global CEO, managing director, director of chief and head taster at Great Domains, that grizzled hunk of a wine salesman that is Derek Kilpin, has not missed a single ball of Wimbledon since the first serve was released last Monday. And I've got no doubt that my chief battle on this evening's show will be getting Derek to talk about champagne and not about Rafael Nadal's abs and whether he can get through his semi-final against Nick Kyrgios, the Greek-Australian firebrand. So expect some tennis on the show this evening. Also, though, far more importantly, expect some really cool conversation about the art of bubbles and food, because that is the thrust of today's show. The idea of it came about with Lanson being the champagne that you wash your strawberries down with at Wimbledon, but champagne and food is about far more than just bubbles and strawberries at Wimbledon. And so today we will also be chatting to two world-class South African producers, and Ferreira joins us. Forget Bubbles Ferreira, and Ferreira is the real one who makes the magic in the Ferreira family. And we will speak to that maths teacher turned winemaker, Paul Gerber at Colmant, about not just where their respective bubbles are at the moment, what they're doing in Couple of Seek, but also how bubbles and food fit together. And then we'll be chatting to a very good friend of the show, Steve Steinfeld, the Joburg Foodie, will be joining us. He's been doing some interesting work with the Lanson brand at the moment, so we'll find out what food goes with champagne. I think there's some interesting answers in store. And then making her debut on the show, and very welcomely so, with some glamour and some culinary hard-hitting insight, we have Jackie Cameron joining us as well. So it's a great lineup for today, and I'll formally introduce all of those guests in just a moment. But first of all, let's have a quick look at some news from the world of wine. So this is your focal point. This is the Trophy Wine Show, brought to you by Investec. Michael Frijon, who is such a stalwart of the South African wine industry. And this is as esteemed a wine competition as we have in South Africa. And included in those pictures are a selection of winemakers and people who've received trophies and received accolades for having fantastic wine, according to the judges. And most impressively, there were a whole pile of wines that got 98 points through the course of the judging. And there were some, not just local judges, but international judges as well, who put those results together. Just off the top of my head, we had, amongst others, 98 points for dessert wine from Niederberg, from a Shiraz, from Bruce Jack, 98 points for a Pinotage, the First Lady out of Warwick, for an Old Vine Chenin from Kleiner Zolzer. And speaking of Chenin, I think the very top there, that I think is Chiara Scott, receiving her award for Chenin Blanc from Brookdale. You'll also see in there Nick Vanada from Oldenburg receiving his certificate for a superb Chardonnay, which picked up 97 points. So just a really, really good selection of wine from some terrific winemakers, and a very, very thorough process that put it all together. Glen Carlo, their red blend, got 98 points, and Paul Kluver with their Chardonnay, they got 98 points as well. If you'd like to know more about the Trophy Wine Show, brought to you by Investec, then join me on the show next Thursday, when Michael, together with a selection of these top performers, including Paul Kluver, he'll be joining us. Karina and RJ will be joining us from Kleine Zalze to celebrate their victories. And just a pile of really, really strong South African winemakers. So look out for that. Bruce Jack as well next week. So well done to all of our trophy winemaker winners. Then on to next Sunday, and another opportunity for Strauss to dive into my bank account and further strip it, but with good reason. This is the Tabernacle auction. The Strauss team, led by Higo Jacobs, have gone into the underground cellar where we've been as a show. If you go back into the archives of Dan Really Likes Wine, you'll find a collection of old wines tasted by us in that particular cellar. It's a splendid space, and a number of those wines are up for auction on the 10th of July. So put that one in the diary. Kicks off 11 a.m. the Tabernacle auction of Strauss & Co. Some wonderful old wine, including some of that GS66 that is available there. So that's one to look out for. And then these are some pizza makers, and this speaks to Porcupine Ridge and their pizza challenge. It kicked off on the 1st of July. It's running again. It ran very successfully last year, and the people who sing in picture are people who did particularly well in last year's challenge. It's one that you can vote for as the public. Geno's and Robertson in Johannesburg was the 2021 winner. If you would like to get involved, very simply, www.votepizza.wine. Not just the chance to give your local pizzeria some kudos, but also the chance to win some wine. There are cases of Porcupine Ridge, as well as an Earthfire pizza stone and cutter. Doesn't that sound incredibly cool? And an overall prize worth over 10,000 Rand just for voting and celebrating your local pizza house. So there you go, www.pizza.wine, and vote for your favorite home of pizza. Does pizza go with champagne? Well, let's find out. Does it go with Cup Classique? We've got some experts to attend to these particular questions, and important ones they are. Our guests this Thursday on Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick n Pay, are the head of tennis at Great Domains, Derek Kilpin, the head of rugby at Colmant, Paul Gerber, the head of keeping Peter in charge at Bubbles Ferreira Wines and Ferreira. And I think Steve Steinfeld's looking for a wedding venue. He's down in KwaZulu-Natal hanging out with internationally renowned chef Jackie Cameron. Guys, welcome. Lovely to have you on. Derek, let's get the difficult stuff out the way. You only came on the show if I agreed to let you talk about tennis for the first 90 seconds. So let's do that. If you were like me, glued to the TV yesterday, glass of Lanson in hand, Rafa Nadal with his abdominal muscles falling apart and 37 years of age kicking in, still pulling off a wonderful victory. And it's been another great fortnight of kicking back with champagne in hand, watching some tennis.
No, it's been another special one in terms of Wimbledon. It was a dire state of affairs about 4 days ago, where the load shedding was. I was on the schedule where it was going off during the primetime matches. So I basically got an inverter, not to turn the lights on, but to turn the TV on. So it was a pleasure watching during the load shedding schedule with the inverter actually working. And what a match! And there's another couple of big ones to go. Can't wait, huh?
And doing so with the Lanson champagne that you bring into South Africa, and it's a brand that's got now a very firm relationship with Wimbledon, and it's a really interesting one because that strawberries and champagne has become a really important part of the mythology of Wimbledon. Tell us a bit about why Lanson gets involved with this, and why champagne and tennis have struck up such a happy relationship.
Yeah, I think I've noticed that. I mean, I think the obvious one is you see some of the brands at sort of Formula One and that type of thing. But if you follow some of the not maybe the Grand Slam tennis things, but whether it's the Masters 500 or 1000s, there's certain other bubbly brands. Some of the Spanish carvers have sort of started to associate themselves with certain tournaments. And I think, I don't know, it's maybe as a category, bubbly, a great sporting occasion. They can't sort of not go together, I guess. And then in terms of Lanson, the relationship's it's got a lot of history. So I think, the first association with Lanson and Wimbledon goes back to, I think, 1977. So it's a long time. In terms of why, I think probably maybe for some obvious reasons with its great exposure. I think the last stat from just pre-COVID, I don't know what the stats are for this Wimbledon, it's not finished yet, but they supposedly get through about 25,000 bottles of champagne in the fortnight of Wimbledon. So that's quite a lot of different people drinking the stuff. So I think from a branding point of view, it's amazing for them. And obviously to be associated with, I'd probably say the Rolls Royce of the 4 Grand Slams, which would have to be Wimbledon. It's an amazing association. And in terms of the strawberry collaboration, I'm not actually sure. I mean, it's probably just a good time of year to eat strawberries in the UK. Whether it goes with champagne or not, it's each to their own. But I've certainly done it. I've been lucky enough to do it once before, drink champagne and eat strawberries and watch some tennis at Wimbledon. And it's they all 3 do go together.
We'll get in particular thoughts from both Jackie and from Steve on that pairing of food and wine. But I think more broadly, one of the things we do an awful lot on Dan Really Likes Wine is talk about the storytelling potential of wine. And I think this is a really good example of how a wine has found a really natural home, and through, in this case, tennis, being able to tell the story of who it is and what it does, and do so really successfully. And that's maybe a good example for some of our South African brands, bubbly or otherwise, to take as to how to perhaps spread their own particular gospel.
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly it. I mean, for them, I've had a chat to, and you've spoken to Emmanuel before, who looks after us at Champagne Lanson. And I think for them to hang on to this contract and this relationship is so important. And I think if you can find that right association with, call it your brand and a particular event, and it works well, you want to hang on to it. So I can only imagine what goes down in the boardroom at a certain time of year when the contracts get negotiated, but they've done pretty well up until now to hang on to it and to sort of make it their own. And obviously all the packaging and all the marketing that goes along with it's always fun, because every year we get sort of new things to work with. This year was a bit difficult because we've had massive shipping issues, the global shipping crisis. So I think our Lanson stock, well, not I think, I know that our Lanson stock actually arrived in South Africa on day 3 of Wimbledon. So we were obviously scrambling, and we've done our best to try and get it in as many of the places that we're waiting for it as possible. But yeah, back to the thing, the association is just amazing, and it's great for the brand. And I think, as you say, I'm sure there's an opportunity for certain brands with certain events. Obviously, expense is one thing, and you need to manage that. But if you can make it work, it's worthwhile. It certainly has been for Lanson.
Strawberries being the natural partner for Lanson at Wimbledon, but it goes far beyond that. And we'll come back to Derek for some more thoughts on bringing together food and wine. Let's head over to our local champagne equivalents, our Cup Classique producers. We have 2 terrific ones with us. Let's kick off with Anne Ferreira, a greater half by some distance of the Ferreira empire, and lovely to have you with us. Before we ask you about pairing food and wine, give us a little update on the Peter Ferreira Bubbles brand and what's been happening of late.
Thanks, Dan. I'm extremely excited because we are about to release our new Blanc de Blanc, the 2016 vintage, as well as our new Extra Brut, which is less time on the lees, and a Chardonnay dominant, Pinot less dominant blend in the next month or so. So 6 years on the lees and about 5 years on the lees for the other one, which is great. Yeah.
And
I think that has been into shape.
I think we're all starting to discover the truth that it is actually Anne Ferreira who is the quiet power behind the throne of Ferreira Bubbles. I see Peter's watching. Hi, everyone, says Mr. Ferreira. The relationship and the team that you guys have, it's obviously a very special one, and both of you are incredibly well established in our local industry. How does it actually work? How do you put this all together, and who ultimately makes the final calls on what goes into those bottles and how Peter Ferreira Bubbly eventually emerges into the market?
Yeah, so I mean, long history. Peter and I have been together what feels like for 100 years, and it's always been around food and Cup Classique. Peter at that time having been with Pujardin, and in fact my mother having started Le Quartier Français in the early 80s, which is how I met Peter, through the food and the wine connect. So it's always been good for us. But Peter very much belongs to Graham Beck, so he is my winemaker for the brand Peter Ferreira. But I go out into the vineyards with him when it comes to blending. I sit and help with that, do that dosage. That is my decision. So yeah, it works well for both of us that way. So if you don't like it, and I don't like the wine, I blame him. If the wine's great, it's all credit due to me.
I see the word coming in from Peter himself. I agree, she owns me, says Peter, who's watching at the moment. Those Peter Ferreira Bubbles, which are, and both Anne and Peter were with me at an event recently where we tried some vintage Graham Beck in this case and paired it with some food, and it worked terrifically well. And that's the real crux of our conversation today. So we'll rope Anne in for that at the moment. I see Belushaba is watching at the moment. Hi, Bubbles, says Notnova. Lovely to have you watching the show this evening. And Jeremy Anthony is also watching. Hi, everyone, says Jeremy. Good to have you as part of the show. One half of our Cup Classique team this evening is Anne. The other half is Paul Gerber. Paul, I have to first of all say congratulations, because I served some of your Colmant bubbles to a dinner that I hosted on Tuesday to a large group of people who had never heard of Colmant, let alone drunk it before, and all absolutely loved it. So it's clearly in a good space. It's been a little while since we've had you on the show. As per Anne a moment ago, give us an update on where Colmant is and what's been happening of late.
Yeah, Dan, it's thanks for the invite to be back on the show. It's a fantastic opportunity, and maybe just to dovetail with what Anne was saying, Peter and Anne, for many of us in the industry, have been the catalyst or the mentors in the industry, especially in our formative years at Colmant, and then in my own personal winemaking career. Peter and Anne have had a massive impact. At times inspiring, challenging to always do better. So, I think it's a wonderful opportunity as an industry to share, and we learn a great deal from each other. And Peter and Anne have certainly been part of that. So I think as a family in the industry, it's great. At the moment this year, we are currently bottling. So I'm a little dirty, my wife mentioned just before we started. But yeah, we were filtering wines today that we blended with a group of winemakers, including Peter, Anne, and Jean-Philippe. So we're really, really excited about the 2022 vintage that's coming. And on Monday, we bottle a wine that we will release in 2030. So that's also, it's really exciting to be part of that program, and to think that there's a wine coming in the future that we spoke about tonight that we bottle in a few days' time.
You're going to have to give me a bit more information on that one, Paul. A wine that you're bottling now, releasing in 2030. Geez, I'll almost be 30 myself by that stage. Tell me a bit more about this one.
Yeah, bubbles keep you young, hey? No, so we have a great love for both Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, but I think the ageability of Chardonnay allows us to push some borders. And already with the Blanc de Blanc that we produce, it's 4 to 4.5 years aging. But we produce a zero dosage Absolute, which we release at the end of this month with Great Domains. And the Absolute, for the first time, is having its own unique blend. Tank 14, and Tank 14 is bottled on Monday afternoon, and it's 100% Chardonnay from really carefully selected vineyards all the way across Robertson, Bonnievale, Franschhoek, and the Hemelanaarde.
Put that in your diary, 2030. The maths teacher's got something special coming. How will it work with food? Well, that's another part of our conversation. Let's head over to our final destination for the week, which is somewhere in KwaZulu-Natal. Steve Steinfeld and Jackie Cameron are with us as well. Steve, where are you? What are you doing there?
Hey, Dan. We're actually at Jackie's Chef School, so the Jackie Cameron School of Food and Wine in Kilpin in KwaZulu-Natal. And I'm here because I judge Jackie's students' final exams every year. And just a shout out to Paul and the team. I have to say a few of them have been using Colmant for their final dinners as part of their welcome drinks.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
I've seen plenty of Steve on your social media, Jackie, and popping up with the things that you do. He generally tries to give off this image of this kind of laissez-faire, drift around South Africa, drink a bit of champagne, eat some good food. But there is a rather serious foodie behind the upmarket Kim Kardashian of food look that he projects so effortlessly, Jackie.
Most definitely. You know, we were actually just talking last night around the dining room table and saying how many years we've now known each other for when we met, and how the relationship, friendship has grown. And definitely the Instagram Steve is not the real Steve. I could promise you that. There's a whole lot more.
Jackie, give us a bit of an introduction to not the food side, which I think we know you incredibly well for, but Jackie Cameron and wine. How much of a love for wine is there, and how much of a role is there for wine in what you do from a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so I think it was very important when I opened my school that it was not called just Jackie Cameron School of Food, because it's the marriage of food and wine. You know, you can't have one without the other. That's what I believe. So it's Jackie Cameron School of Food and Wine. And we were actually the first school in the country that was internationally recognized for both food and wine. So my students don't do the WSET level 1 course. They jump straight to the level 2 course. And after them being here for a year, they do that course. So it's, you know, the service of it, the tasting of it, the sampling of it. And I actually take all my students, we get into my bus and we go to Cape Town once a year and we go and experience all these different farms, these beautiful farms. And that first-hand experience that the students have with the wine, with the farms, with the winemakers, and the winemakers just go to a phenomenal amount of effort with each of my students, and the tour that we do. So it leaves that lasting impression on my students. And then when it comes to their final dinner, they've got to pair it. So it's a food and wine pairing that they've got to do. And when I say final dinner, it's after 18 months that they do this. So yeah, everything's about food and wine. Yeah.
I absolutely love that. You spend a lot of time, Steve, with all manner of restaurateurs and chefs and people in the broader culinary space. What makes Jackie stand out for you?
I think as much as everyone in the industry will claim it, I think Jackie has to be the hardest working chef in the industry. She doesn't stop. She's constantly on the go. And just watching the school grow from, you know, I mean, firstly, we can take it back to when she was a top 10 chef at Hartford House. And then, you know, going on her own way to start and build the school and just to watch it grow from strength to strength every year. You know, we were actually, one of the things we were laughing at is that one of our first pictures is at the Eat Out Awards. But every subsequent Eat Out Awards, Jackie makes sure that her students are always there cooking at some part of the meal.
So I've never been in a beautiful outfit. I've always been in a chef jacket. And the last time was one of the first times we met. I was much younger.
I think it was about 6 years ago.
All right, it's clearly a great partnership, and it's one that you both revel in. And that partnership of food and wine, in particular, Steve, is one that you have got stuck into. So let's move on to that as a topic for all of our guests, and do that to kick off with a little video that you put together. Steve's been doing some work with Champagne Lanson, exploring restaurants and pairing food and wine together. And this is Steve Steinfeld, the Joburg Foodie, dropping in on Saint.
Hey everyone, it's Steve, and I'm going to be visiting my favorite restaurants around Johannesburg as I search for the perfect pairings for Champagne Lanson. First up, Saint Restaurant. One of Joburg's trendiest restaurants, Saint is as well known for their bustling bar scene as they are for their twisted Italian fare and traditional Neapolitan-style pizza. I'll be pairing Champagne Lanson Le Rosé with their pepperoni pizza. The zingy acidity of the champagne meets that of the tomato base, while the red fruit and mineral notes dazzle against the saltiness of the pepperoni, while the crispy crust is a perfect match for Lanson's delicate effervescence.
Go. That's Steve Steinfeld out at Saint. When initially this partnership got struck up, Steve, how nervous were you about going out and finding food that you felt could authentically pair with a drink in Champagne or Cup Classique that for so many South Africans is often reserved to simply a glass before a meal or something we raise in celebration?
Well, I think that's exactly the point, and it's what I was really excited about, is to showcase the versatility of champagne, especially when you've got a range like Champagne Lanson does, and how you can actually take it throughout a meal. So it is, as you said, does have that misconception of, you know, being with starters, aperitifs, oysters, but there's so much more that you can actually take it through, depending on what age the champagne is, what type of dosage there is, and yeah, as you saw, we did Saint as the first one, but we've actually gone through the whole Champagne Lanson range and gone to a host of very interesting and different restaurants where you can really see how the versatility and how well it actually does pair with a whole host of different cuisines and dishes.
I think I could drink and eat those bubbles breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
In fact, I know a few people who do, Derek Kilpin. If you look at the space of Champagne or Cup Classique with food, Jackie, and with your students, is it becoming more understood, more appreciated that something with bubbles can form part of what we'd normally consider to be a tasting menu, where for so long it was really the preserve of the still wines and something sweet at the back end?
I was actually just thinking about this earlier and trying to work out. I did a wine tasting bubble weekend with Colmant, and it must have been 4 years I'd been at Hartford House. So yeah, many years ago, and we did a whole weekend, and we did a dinner on the Friday night, and then actually all the guests with the July race. Race event, Durban July, happening this weekend. And then on Sunday, we did a bubbly breakfast as well. And for me, you know, I find that at the end of a meal, I love having, like, somebody will have an espresso. I like to start with bubbles and end, because I found it refreshing. I feel it really refreshes my palate. And so often when I was at Hartford, even on my normal pairing of menu, and still at the school we do it, I've often paired my desserts with bubbles, with CC, with champagne, and with teaching my students. I think because of my love of it, I think every one of my students understand the complete passion that I have, and hopefully they leave here with that same passion and go out into the industry, because I definitely don't drink it just at the beginning of the meal and just with oysters. So if anything, I'm going to inspire them to know that there's many other options with champagne.
Peter Ferreira, the godfather of bubbles in South Africa, watching on. Great forward-thinking, Jackie. Food and wine is and remains a journey of excitement and exploration. If you do this, you will be richly rewarded. And then he follows on with a really important observation. Peter, I agree with Steve. Bubbles is the most versatile pairing wine ever. Let's find out if Paul Gerber agrees down at Colmant. Drinking your bubbles, Paul, on its own is a joy. What about the bubbles and food pairing? How important is that to you?
Yeah, I think, first of all, a good classique or champagne should be able to be drunk on and enjoyed on its own, as you correctly state. But I also think the incredible versatility of the freshness and acidity and this kind of zippy nature that some blends can have, or this, at the technical conference yesterday, we tasted a Blanc de Noir from Canard Duché, a champagne house, and you had this opulence and richness, but really elegance from the Pinot Noir, and immediately you begin to think of things that you can enjoy. So I think the variety of styles within a house like Lanson or in Peter Ferreira or Colmant allow for a versatility of dishes, and also sometimes serving temperature can have an impact on which dish you decide to serve it with. So I think some older versions of a Blanc de Blanc can be served slightly warmer with a certain dish, and then if it's a younger degorgement, maybe just a little bit more chilled, zippy, bright, and you serve it with another dish. So I think Peter and Steve are 100% right on the versatility.
As a winemaker, Paul, is there part of the process where a little compartment at the back of the winemaking brain is thinking, I wonder what we can do to this to include it as something that's going to work really well with food? Does that element of taking it beyond just drink it for a glass of celebration or enjoyment or breakfast come into play? Do you think about how it might work with food as you are producing particular wines?
Yeah, I think especially with Cap Classique and the champagne, because it's a blended wine, sometimes you, like in harvest time, you walk into the cellar and you have these wonderful aromas coming through, and you walk past certain tanks and you have this very distinct limey zestiness coming from a particular tank whilst it's fermenting, and your thought will go a certain way, maybe to more like a dessert style souffle. And then you have a slightly riper portion, and you're testing the sugar of a wine from Franschhoek, and there's this kind of deep lemon, and maybe you're thinking a little bit more something richer. Again, for me, always I love Gruyere souffle with Blanc de Blanc. So you think towards that. But at the end of the day, for the wine, I think it's about the balance of the wine, and if the wine is balanced, elegant, and seamless, it's then that you open this door to an experience of versatility.
Grant Saul's watching at the moment on YouTube. Great lineup, Dan. Bubbly is always a great topic to discuss. It certainly is, Grant. So let's discuss it some more with Anne Ferreira. Some thoughts there from Paul on bringing our Cup Classique together with food. I'm guessing it probably features fairly significantly in not just the bubbles that you and Peter produce in your respective spaces, but probably most evenings in the Ferreira household.
That it does, absolutely, Dan. But I mean, as Paul was saying, the versatility is so incredible. I mean, where can you find another wine that you can get up in the morning and go, oh my God, I need a drink, and whatever I'm going to have it with, doesn't matter. Nobody's going to look at you and say you've got a problem. But I mean, I think the versatility is so rich and wide. I mean, you think of something like duck with a Pinot Noir based Cap Classique or a champagne. Foie gras with a demi-sec or a sweet. I think one of the nicest experiences I've had on one of my many trips, and I've had it more than once in Champagne, is them actually decanting a bottle of demi-sec, which they served actually with something like foie gras, as a starter, opposed to at the end of the meal or not drinking a demi-sec at all. the Blanc de Blanc, we are Chardonnay mad, that the brightness, the beautiful purity of it goes so well, as Paul says, with a cheese like a Comté or one of those ones. It's kind of endless, and one can literally do a meal from beginning to end and only drink a couple of Sikh or a beautiful champagne.
What is key then, and for us as consumers, to our understanding of bringing food and Cap Classique or champagne together?
Look, I think, if you live in Champagne or you visit it often enough, you see that that's all they drink. They're incredibly loyal to it, and it's a no-brainer. It is the drink to drink. In South Africa, the fact that the Cap Classique category is still the fastest growing category is incredibly rewarding in the wine industry. And I think the association are working incredibly hard to get people to understand that this is the drink that you should drink all the time, that it is no longer just a drink that you drink to celebrate something. But as I said, if you get up in the morning and you go, gosh, I've made it through the night, let's start with something super sexy and delicious and crack open a Colmant or something like that, one can do it. And more people are doing that. I think one of our challenges is also to get more and more restaurants to actually be serving Cap Classique by the glass, and also a variety of Cap Classiques, getting the wonderful development that we have in South Africa of the sommeliers, looking at them and saying, this is a great alternative to, let's say, a white wine or even a champagne. Sorry, Derek. So, yeah, I think that's it.
Well, we've name-checked Derek there, so let's go back to Great Domains HQ and get a similar thought, but from a champagne perspective. A lot of Cap Classique support locally and people going into that food and Cap Classique pairing. Is that the same for champagne? We saw Steve's video. He's definitely found plenty of food that goes with champagne, but is it a growing trend both here and internationally where food and champagne working together and not just strawberries and bubbles at Wimbledon is becoming more of a thing?
Yeah, Dan, I think maybe, as also Anne alluded to, overseas, or certainly in Champagne or France, it's way more commonplace to have those sort of pairings. We've had similar things when visiting the region at restaurants, and they're a lot more adventurous, and it probably stems from I suppose a confidence in that it's something that's drunk by pretty much everyone, and with that in place, it's easier to play with menus and food, and that's, as I say, it's often a really exciting option in restaurants where there's champagne paired with various courses. And I think that's maybe where there's almost an opportunity here, whether it's champagne or Cap Classique, for certain, I suppose, restaurants and establishments to try and be a bit more adventurous with the pairing side of things, because obviously with wine it's a bit safer and you can have amazing pairings, and that's great. But I think the opportunity lies, again, with what a lot of everyone said, is with the versatility in champagne and Cap Classique ranges. You can play with sugar and acidity, and I think when it comes to food and you've got those two elements and obviously bubbles on top of that, you've got a lot to work with. And if one's excited enough and passionate about and to do something different, there could and should be, I think, a lot more pairings with, whether it's the local version or the French version, on wine pairing menus. It's normally as an aperitif, which is great, and then the menus get stuck into wines, and then you end up with the dessert wines. It's all fine, but I think there can be different options that could be explored. Yeah.
You mentioned the sweetness, the sugar, and you mentioned the acidity. How much then is the next step in this journey of understanding around getting a feel for what the different styles of a champagne or a Cap Classique are? We look at the rise of a demi-sec, a slightly sweeter style in South Africa, which is finding a real home across the board. How much more do we need to know about these to realize what the differences are between the different wines, for instance, that Champagne Lanson produces, to then understand what kind of food goes with those different ranges?
No, I think that's a big part of it, and I think the challenge is exactly that. And and then it boils down to education, I guess, in terms of what people are exposed to and what they know. I actually had something yesterday where a client phoned and ordered. It was Paul Roger, and the one that they ordered was the one that's got a bit of sugar. It's the demi-sec called Rich, and they had no idea. And I phoned and I said, "You do realize it's got some sugar? I mean, there's a bit. It's off dry, I guess." And they were like, "Oh no, we don't want that one. We want the dry one." So even in that situation where someone's ordering something, they're not quite aware maybe of the name or the different categories. So I think that is, I don't want to say, a little stumbling block. Let's call it a challenge. And I think that's can only be overcome through tastings and education, whether it's the Cap Classique Association certainly doing it on the local front, or importers doing functions where you're doing one house, which I always think is a nice idea, one house, and you do from start to finish, from the Brut Nature, so bone dry, bubbles, right up to sort of the vintage and the rosé, and then the demi-sec. And I think that's where people start to sort of really learn about the range and then understand where they can pluck from the range to then play with different foods. But yeah, definitely an education thing. But I think really, I wasn't aware of the sort of fastest growing category that Anne said, which is awesome, because I think that sort of can fuel a lot of people empowering themselves from a knowledge point of view in the bubbles category.
Death to the mimosa, viva the different styles of champagne and Cap Classique. Grant Stalls, who is a fine judge of wine, watching at the moment. I really enjoy a demi-sec, Graham Beck or Paul Roger with a good curry. I think that's an excellent call. That little bit of sweetness up against the heat and spice of a curry. Brilliant, Grant. I'll be around to your house for dinner very happily if that is on offer. And it leads me rather nicely into my final round of questioning for a wonderful group of guests we've had on the show this evening. Let's kick off in Franschhoek and our former maths teacher. I'd like from you, Mr. Gerber, to give me an example for you of an absolutely fabulous dish, perhaps one that's got a touch of the exotic or something a little different, that I could have, where Colmant and any of the wines that you produce is going to give me a really memorable experience across the board.
Dan, it's hard to choose because, like we said already, there's a lot of versatility. I think one of my really guilty pleasures is to enjoy Blanc de Blanc, but just with lamb chops and salt and pepper on a good braai, well or grilled well. And Blanc de Blanc, it's a simple thing, but sometimes the simplest things are the nicest. And for me, one of the greatest moments was to be in Sutherland at a friend's farm and perfectly prepared lamb chops with Blanc de Blanc under the stars. That was for me probably one of the nicest things. The acidity and the kind of fattiness of the lamb chop, just with salt and pepper to season, is probably my highlight or one of my favorite things. But maybe just to dovetail with what Derek was saying, for us at home, we like to serve both champagne and Cap Classique alongside each other. For me, it's not about which one is better, but again, about this versatility that you have in the wines. And I think that's one thing as South Africans learning about sparkling wine. We shouldn't stop to serve both wines to our guests together, because it's not about one being better than the other. It's about which one works better with which meal. But yeah, my take home would be lamb chops on the grill or on the braai with Blanc de Blanc.
I love that you've brought in some red meat to go with bubbles, which people might initially raise an eyebrow to, but hopefully after our conversation this evening, it's like, no, I'm going to give that a try this weekend. I think it might work out really well. But also making that point about champagne and Cap Classique being complementary rather than always competitive. And I think that is a really, really good analysis. Melissa Sutherland is in high spirits. Ooh, sounds delicious, says Melissa. It certainly does. Let's go over to Anne Ferreira and pose a similar question. If I drop in on Chateau Ferreira for dinner, you've got so many different bubbles to choose from across the board. What are you serving me, and what's for dinner?
Okay, so how long is a piece of string? But I think it would probably have to be fresh fish with a beurre blanc, and it has many special reasons for that, apart from that I think it's a great match, particularly with the blanc de blanc, is that when Peter and I got engaged in Champagne, that was the highlight of our meal that we had at in Champagne on the day of our engagement. So, and whether it's Cap Classique or Champagne, it's always great.
The greatest day of Peter Ferreira's life, and it wasn't too bad for Anne either. That does sound like a really good pairing. Daryl Balfour, who's watching at the moment, as he does so often, just back from his latest misadventures in Kenya with Angela Lloyd. Bubbles and a good mac and cheese, which sounds like a really simple pairing, and that is so often the very best. A bit of richness cutting through there. I think you've got a terrific example. Nice one, Daryl. Peter Ferreira, there is an added value of drinking champagne and or Cap Classique. The bubbles come free of charge. I think that applies to Anne as well, but we won't go down that particular rabbit hole. Let's head over to our chefs. Now I'm going to put you on the spot here, Steve Steinfeld, because you and I have spent many hours together drinking and eating and having a great time. I distinctly remember you assuring me that there was absolutely no better pairing on the planet for bubbles than McDonald's fries.
Yes, I was about to say, I don't know if I'd have to specify McDonald's fries, but I think just absolutely simple, burger and fries. You've got the fatty from the burger and the oil. You've got the crispiness of the fries. And if it's a cheeseburger, even better, you've got some creaminess there. And I just think it's a really underrated, pairing, and it does work so well. If I had to elevate it a bit, I'd say probably PGR in Rosebank. I frequent that Keys Art Mile quite often. But yeah, PGR, simple burger with the works, cheese, fries on the side, and some great champagne or MCC. It's always going to be a winner for me.
Which ties in with your choice of a pepperoni pizza at Saint and the video we watched a little earlier, that Champagne Lanson, also ties in with Daryl Balfour and his suggestion of bubbles and mac and cheese. As somebody who writes so much, Steve, who speaks to so many people on a daily basis, giving them a guiding hand in terms of food and wine, because the image of champagne, it comes across as something so luxurious, so high-end. I think there's often a perception that, well, if I'm going to have champagne, it's got to be with truffles, it's got to be with souffles, it's got to be with 17-course tasting menus, when in effect, as you've shown here with your suggestions, it's actually something that can go with the simplest, most blue-collar of dishes.
100%, and I think that ties back to my initial comment about how it is just such a versatile pairing wine, and it does work with so many different things. And I think champagne has a beautiful story, and everything is always better with a story. But I think it's seen as a wine of celebration or a wine to celebrate with. Whereas I think in current times we should be celebrating every moment we have. So I think if we go with that celebration angle, I think we should be celebrating every day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I mean, I think even just, we're talking about demi-sec, but creamy scrambled eggs, some, popped tomatoes just in the pan. Absolutely beautiful with the demi-sec too. Just ice cold demi-sec, scrambled eggs, winner.
All right, some suggestions to get you thinking about your next meal with some bubbles. What about the great Jackie Cameron, top 10 chef, South African culinary icon? What are you cooking me, Jackie, when I make a long overdue visit down to KwaZulu-Natal and you open some bubbles?
Yeah, we look forward to that. Definitely long overdue. I think when Anne was speaking earlier and she was speaking about bubbles and her experience, it straight away reminded me of when I was last many years ago at their home and Peter made a suckling pig. It was delicious, and I definitely remember drinking let's say a few glasses, not a few bottles, obviously, of champagne with it, or CC it actually was, definitely. And then also Daryl mentioned the mac and cheese, and I've got a little baby girl, Jasmine, that's nearly 2 years old, and so we've been eating quite a bit of mac and cheese. So I've definitely been eating, you always finish off whatever they don't finish. So I've definitely been sipping on some bubbles with some mac and cheese more recently than ever else before, I think. But if I had to go back to childhood memories and a dish that I always think that pairs so beautifully because of all the flavor profiles within a CC for me, is I had, and I think growing up, I think we would all know a hole in the middle. So that was your bread that you'd take out the center and put an egg in and fries. And what I used to do is, or do, and if you were visiting, I'll do it for you, we'd take a shortbread. So with a little bit of sugar on top, take a shortbread and cut the center of the shortbread out. And then we'd put like little prune compote on the side and do it with a locally produced Le Petit France Camembert, but like a little bit more mature, so like oozing, and they really get it lovely and mature, and put that on kind of sitting on the side, if you wanted to say, of the shortbread. And then we've got a really fantastic Italian man, Franco, and he does just the most beautiful charcuterie. And we thinly slice that on top of that, and it goes with a bit of cranberry sauce and some sesame seeds. So there's, that would just be one of the courses, because we've always got to, eat and enjoy and open a few bottles. But there's just so much versatility. And also, like you're saying, with the scrambled egg, that's just a simple little dish that whenever I'm thinking about bubbles, that's what comes to mind because of all the flavor profiles within bubbles. Well. Yeah, but yeah, like I say, the meat combination, the lamb, I think it's also breaking down. Like I said, it's refreshing at the end of the meal. So we're eating a piece of meat, you're eating a pork belly that we so often do on the Weber's outside. I think it's just so refreshing on my palate that it really just does break down the richness.
Cuts through the fat as well.
Yeah, cuts through the fat, and allows you to continue enjoying the rest of the day or evening. Or morning.
Very similar to conversations we've had recently with Ken Forrester on Chenin Blanc. Is there anything you cannot pair Chenin with? Is there anything you cannot pair bubbles with? It would seem the answer is an almost complete no. Let's go back for the last time to Derek, who has not just drunk much champagne. Lanson, he's drunk plenty of champagne from all over France. If you are heading back into France, you've got a bottle of Lanson of any variety. What's the dish, Derek? What's that one meal paired with champagne that's going to put a smile on your face and blow my socks off?
Yeah, so Dan, it won't be anything that I'm cooking you, unfortunately. There's not too many skills on that front, but for me, on the bubbles, whether it's local or foreign, in the dryer, is sort of in through the range. Sushi is my chosen food, I guess, with bubbles. I think it's amazing. And yeah, we do it probably of all foods when we sort of living in Johannesburg. That's probably the food that I have the most often with bubbles, as I say, whether it's local or foreign. So obviously there's a variety of sushi, but just in general, sushi for me is an amazing match with bubbles. And sorry, it wasn't an elaborate description, so it's very broad, but sushi is my meal of choice. And I was a bit disappointed Anne didn't mention what her and Peter would pair with their crayfish in Pringle Bay. I thought she might go with that, but the engagement, fair enough.
Oh dear. All right, crayfish, sushi, it just adds this long list of food that goes with bubbles. Last one very quickly, Derek. Who's winning Wimbledon?
Nick Kyrgios.
Nick Kyrgios to win. I'm going to go Simona Halep for the other half of the question, but still holding thumbs that Rafa will somehow come together. Guys, thank you. It has been an enlightening evening, and I say that deliberately in the time of ESCOM, to be able to share some great bubbles and some great thoughts. And it's a space that I'm seeing more and more where people are not just having a glass because there's a 21st or a birthday or somebody's got a promotion or they've had a child or there's a reason for celebration. People are really, really, really enjoying their champagne, enjoying their cup classique with food. And I think that is such an important evolution of our appreciation of all things bubbly. So thank you for joining us, Anne, much appreciated. You can let Peter out of a cupboard momentarily and let's enjoy the evening. Paul, I've penciled in 2030 for that rather special bubbles, which will be fantastic. Derek, I look forward to joining you and the team tomorrow afternoon to watch some tennis and drink some bubbles. And Steve and Jackie, I suspect the night is just getting going, and we'll be seeing Instagram posts at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning as the sun comes up. Thank you all so much for being part of the show and giving us all such great insight into food and bubbles. And we'll see you all again soon with glass in hand. Thank you.
Cheers.
Dan.
Cheers.
So there we go. It's an educational process. No thanks to me, thanks to the incredible guests we get week in and week out. And today was such a terrific example. And that wraps us up for this evening. If you are part of the Pick and Pay Wine Club and you're joining tonight's winemakers table, that is De Grendel, Lamotte, and Sarensburg, then I will see you online in about 5 minutes or so. I'll be hosting that with the Pick and Pay team. If not, well, I'll see you back on Monday, I hope, when a gentleman called Jan joins me from France to talk about some rather special wine and his incredible story as a figurehead in the French wine industry. But you'll have to wait till Monday to find out a little more. Our magazine show is up for another week. This week, it features Erica Obermeier. I dropped in on a brand new space in Stellenbosch to get a feel for what's been happening and how things have been running. And we also get a taste of new releases from Radford Dale, thanks to Tom Pryor, who I had lunch with at the Short Market Club over some rather eclectic and very exciting wine. So that's the Dan Really Likes Wine space for this weekend. I'll also see you later tonight. It's a long night for me. If you happen to be at the Greek Sports Club and their fundraising quiz, which I shall be hosting for many hours and trying to get as many wine questions in as I possibly can. Enjoy the rest of the tennis if you are a fan. Enjoy the rest of your bubbles if you've been drinking them this evening. And do your best to start having bubbles with food and enjoying what, as our guests this evening have shown, is a wonderful collaboration. Cheers. To join the Pick and Pay Wine Club, simply SMS your smart shopper number to 36775. It's absolutely free, and you'll get for yourself 3 times the smart shopper points on every bottle of wine bought. You'll also get a 20% discount on 10 different wines each month, a 25% discount on a case of wine, and a Magnum, some terrific competitions and invitations to awesome events.